in those moments of you touching me, unfortunately, I did end up feeling violated and angry, and then I'd shut down on you physically, emotionally, and sexually.
Yep.
So you're turning towards me, and I'm just doing an abrupt turn away.
Right.
And again, you had no idea what was going on. You were just being playful and just innocently touching your wife.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey there, thanks for joining us. We are so grateful that you keep showing up here with us every week, and we're very excited for you to keep learning and growing in your blended family experience.
Absolutely. And you know, we hope that you had an enjoyable Valentine's Day
Yep.
and that you were able to spend some quality time together and make a genuine heart-to-heart connection with each other. That's an important priority in every marriage.
For sure.
We've certainly been intentional about making that a priority in our marriage, and we try to experience that connection on a regular basis, not just Valentine's Day, of course.
Yep.
So it's not just about where you went for dinner or the cards and the gifts that you might have exchanged. It's really about your connection.
That's right. And, you know, we'd love to hear from you about ways that you might be creating meaningful connection in your marriage, or maybe you just want to ask us some questions about how you can create more of that. Maybe we can help you with that.
Yeah.
If that sounds good to you, you can go over to mikeandkimcoaching.com/share. And you can share with us. You can ask questions, however you want to do that. Just fill out the form there. Or if you just want to leave us some feedback, you can leave a rating or a review over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. However you choose to communicate, we would really be grateful to hear from you.
Yeah. Now, we shared last week that our sexual relationship is a piece of how we create or experience meaningful connection. And the truth is, how we connect sexually not only impacts our relationship in the bedroom, but also outside the bedroom as well.
That's for sure. You know, last week we discovered the importance of sex in marriage, and we challenged you to consider two things. First, your mindset, and second, your communication. Now, if you missed last week's discussion, you might want to go back and check it out. But if you've already caught it, then hopefully you've had some time to think about your mindset. Remember, I shared how things improved in our sexual relationship when my mindset shifted from sex being all about my individual gratification to focusing on our mutual fulfillment together. And the truth is, a healthy sex life starts in the brain. It's about your mindset.
And maybe you were able to engage in some dialogue about your sexual relationship, even if it was something small.
Yep.
And that both of you were able to openly express insights about your likes and your dislikes, or maybe even talk about the imbalance of your sexual desire and your rhythm. Or maybe you talked about something else that we didn't even mention last week. And that's great.
That's right.
If you are able to have some healthy, open dialogue, we commend you for taking that step of vulnerability. And we know from our own experience how hard it can be to communicate and to work through sexual issues. It's not easy. We've been married almost 21 years, and we still struggle with this sometimes.
For sure, yeah.
But we have learned that the more you communicate openly about your sexual challenges, the easier it gets, and your passion can actually increase, even when it's an issue that might be really hard to talk about.
That's right. You know, we've also learned that shutting down, holding back, or repressing what's actually going on for you is not only unhealthy, but over time, it will slowly erode your connection both inside and outside the bedroom. And this will most likely lead to even more pain and dysfunction down the road. It's critical to have a healthy mindset and to talk openly with each other. And we know how difficult it can be, like Kim just said. We've been there multiple times over the past couple of decades. So today we're just going to share some personal challenges around sexual passion, as well as many of the common challenges that lots of couples face, both first family couples and blended family couples. And so today we're talking primarily about challenges. Next week, we're going to talk about some tips around some of those challenges. You know, for us, some of the challenges we've faced actually started really early on. Last week, we shared that we both experienced that spark or that romantic attraction to each other on a picnic, right? Our first picnic together. And not long after that, we had a conversation around the challenges that we might face, and we expressed some of our individual concerns. Now, this was before we officially started dating, and it seemed like we were starting out with some great openness and real maturity.
Yeah, it did.
Don't you think?
Yeah. And things seemed to be going so well that we got engaged 3 months later and married only 3 months after our engagement. So it was a 6-month whirlwind of romance, even though we'd known each other as friends for quite some time prior to that spark, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, we also shared that it was only about 18 months into our marriage when our passion started to wane and we experienced some pretty big bumps in the road. Not just around our sex life, but many other issues came up for us as well, especially around parenting. Now, in hindsight, we can look back and we remember that initial conversation we had and several others after that as we engaged in some premarital counseling, and we even attended a 2-day workshop with Ron Deal to learn about stepfamily dynamics. And all of that made us think that we were really equipped to handle what was ahead.
Yeah, of course.
But in reality, we had only scratched the surface. We still had so much more to learn and so many crucial and important conversations and issues that we needed to work through together.
Yeah, and honestly, if we had to do it again, I think we would have slowed down our pace and taken some much needed time to understand more about these complex dynamics and really unpacked some issues such as our expectations, our values, our parenting approaches, just to name a few things, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were so many things that blindsided us. And now, 21 years later, as blended family coaches, we know how beneficial it is to take your time and not rush into marriage, to really prepare yourselves for those challenges ahead that are bound to come.
Yeah, I agree. You know, if we had done that, I think things would have been smoother for us. And sure, we still would have run into bumps in the road and experienced growing pains, but we would have probably been better prepared to handle those things and stay connected as a united team instead of all that stuff causing us to drift apart.
Right.
You know, it's funny how romance can tend to make us feel like we've just got to get things moving. But now that we're more than 2 decades in, we've probably realized that, hey, we had a lot of time and we really didn't need to rush it. In fact, a lot of the research suggests that couples who date for more than 2 years have a better chance at lifelong love than those who rush in. I'm really glad that we beat the odds, honey. You know, that's great. But we've probably paid a price for that.
Yeah, I think that's true in lots of areas of our partnership, including our sexual connection. I really do wish we would have talked more about the realities of our sexual baggage before we got married.
Yeah, that's true.
And like we said last week, we're not therapists, but we've done a lot of research and personal work, and we know from our own relationship that our past experiences can turn into big challenges. And that's true in lots of areas, and certainly when it comes to sex. You know, I came into our marriage with quite a lot of sexual baggage from my past, experiences that were profoundly wounding. And as much as I wanted to move beyond my past and just leave it in the past, the reality was those old wounds, the hurts and the painful memories didn't just go away because I remarried. And they have impacted our sexual relationship. Now, I've worked really hard to surface those hurts in healthy ways, and I've experienced a lot of healing over the years.
Yeah, you've done a lot of hard work.
I have, but it's been a long, challenging process because the reality is that sexual issues run deep. And for me, they carried a lot of shame and regret and self-condemnation. There were very wrong and inappropriate things that were done to me by others in my past, such as insolence, assault, and objectification. But I also have to take responsibility for some of the risky situations I allowed myself to be in and some of the poor choices that I made around sexuality. And now I'm not going to get into the details of all of this.
Don't need to do that.
No. But I share this because it's important for all of us to understand that regardless of what happened in the past or how it happened or who did what, the result can be deep shame and unhealthy expectations or unhealthy mindsets around sex.
Right.
There can be wounds.
Yeah.
And that was certainly the case for me. The hurts from my past set the stage for many challenges around sexuality in general, and I carried that baggage into our marriage, and it's negatively impacted our sexual relationship for many years.
Yeah, we've certainly faced our challenges, and you know, I wasn't innocent and unscathed myself when it came to sex and us getting together. I had a few previous relationships that were sexually active, and at times there was some pornography that was part of the picture. My sexual baggage created kind of a selfish approach to sex, and my mindset was sometimes focused on my own individual gratification rather than our mutual sexual fulfillment. So those histories that we both had and kind of the dysfunctions kind of clashed together and created some significant challenges for you and me. And all of that was kind of dormant or ignored for
Early
those first
on,
couple of years in
yeah.
our marriage, right?
Yeah.
We were acting, I think, the way we thought we were supposed to act, rather than being really vulnerable and honest with each other. And after a couple of years, that really came to a head.
Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to leave my past in the past.
Yeah, who doesn't when it's painful, right?
Yeah. But that's really not a realistic expectation because it does come up. So let's just share an example to make this more tangible, right?
Yeah,
of
a simple one.
Yeah, how this actually played out in our marriage and created challenges on a regular basis.
Simple but emotional.
Yes, very, very difficult. So, honey, you've got a stronger sex drive than I do.
I do, yes.
And you've tended to pursue me pretty consistently over the years. And the fact is, you're a pretty playful guy. And that's actually one of the things that I love about you. So for the first 15 years of our marriage, one of your playful gestures was to give a gentle caress on my back or my shoulders or bottom when you happened to be walking behind me. And our home is quite cozy.
It's small, you mean?
Yes, especially our kitchen.
Right.
So there were many opportunities for us to be in close physical contact simply as we go about our daily life. And that meant that there was quite a lot of what I would call drive-by touching on your part.
Yes.
Right.
I'm a little handsy sometimes.
Right. So as you were walking behind me in our cozy kitchen, you would touch me. And in reality, there was nothing malicious about this gesture from you. It was perfectly innocent and appropriate.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was meant to be playful and also to let you know that I noticed you and I desire you physically. To me, it was kind of flirty and fun, and I thought it was one way to keep our sexual passion levels on kind of a consistent roll, right? Plus, my strongest love language is physical touch. So I was kind of just speaking my own love language to you.
Yes. And all of that is actually really sweet. And we know that physical affection in a marriage is a really healthy way of connecting. But sadly, there was actually a lot going on under the surface that you were unaware of that innocent gesture was doing to me internally, those drive-by touchings. And because it caused me actually to relive a difficult memory and experience pain, I would end up shutting down on you in those moments. And I was reluctant to talk about what I was actually experiencing when you would touch me in that way.
What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple,
And creating more connection as a family.
experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there. Yeah, and it wasn't until only about 5 years ago that you were finally able to tell me what was happening in a way that we could really connect and talk.
Right.
Right. For you internally, when I'd pass by and give you a little pat on the backside, that was a struggle. And I didn't know that.
You had no idea.
And I know that was really hard for you to talk about. But maybe you could just share a little bit of what was happening for you in the moment and still what happens if I do a drive-by touching.
Yeah, sure. When I was in my mid-20s, I had a fun friend, and we loved to get all dressed up and go out to the clubs in San Francisco.
Okay.
And we just
Girls' night out.
Right. We just really enjoyed fashion. We enjoyed music, and we loved to dance. And there was one night that we were out clubbing, and I was wearing a dress that was cut low in the back. And like I said, we were all about the fashion, and this dress really wasn't all that revealing, but it was semi-backless. But as I was standing there, really just minding my own business in the nightclub, a man walked behind me, and he put his hand on my back. And he kept his hand there, and he rubbed up and down and across the open section of my dress over my bare skin.
Without even asking. Just did. Yeah.
Without even acknowledging me. Now, I've had way worse things done to me physically and sexually in my past. So when I talk about this specific incident, it seems pretty minor even to me. I mean, what's the big deal? There was alcohol and dancing involved late at night.
Yeah.
So within that context, it actually seems kind of harmless. But the deep wound came from the message I received in that moment from that man. And the message was that I was an object to be used for him to get his own cheap thrills. It was obvious that he was enjoying this interaction, But like I said, he hadn't even acknowledged me. He hadn't spoken a word to me. He hadn't even looked me in the face.
He's just rubbing your back with no words at all?
Yeah,
Wow.
It was a drive-by touching, literally.
Yeah, big time. Big time.
Now, the hurt is rooted in his complete disregard for me as a person who might not want to be groped by a total stranger in that moment. It seemed like he just assumed that the cut of my dress was an open invitation for him to put his hands all over me. I felt violated, but I also felt reduced to an object of little significance or worth. That's really what it was about.
Yeah, I can see that.
Now, I don't spend a ton of time thinking about this incident, really. Like I've said, I've endured far worse behavior, even abuse from men in my past.
Yeah.
And honestly, I hadn't even thought about that man and that night, honey, until you did one of your drive-by touches early on in our marriage. And when that happened, I was immediately just kind of transported back to that night in that nightclub being groped in San Francisco, and the memory just flooded me.
Yeah.
And there was nothing I could do to control my reaction. Every time you walked by me and touched or even brushed my backside, I experienced a visceral response in my body, and I felt violated.
Yeah, especially when you don't see it coming, right?
Right.
That's the thing.
That's
Yeah.
it. So I felt this violation from you, my own husband, who I, love dearly, and I know that you love me, and you were not violating me.
Yeah.
And it was all so painful and confusing that I just couldn't bring myself to talk to you about it, honey. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want you to think that I was accusing you of bad behavior, because that wasn't the case.
Right.
I was just really fearful and worried about how you'd react or what you would think about me.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm just obliviously going on my merry way.
Completely oblivious, yeah. But in those drive-by moments of you touching me, unfortunately, I did end up feeling violated and angry, and then I'd shut down on you physically, emotionally, and certainly sexually.
Yep.
So you're turning towards me, and I'm just doing an abrupt turn away.
Right. Yeah.
And again, you had no idea what was going on. You were just being playful and just innocently touching your wife.
Yeah, and when you would pull away or shut down, I think I had an idea in my head that I needed to step up my game on pursuing you. So guess what I did? More drive-by touching and trying to be playful and draw you out, right?
Oh, man.
Right.
That was the worst thing you could do. Yeah.
But I had no idea. The reality was I was just ignorant of what was actually happening.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when you found the courage to talk to me about it, but I do remember that the first time you tried to talk to me about it, I reacted really poorly.
Yeah.
My first response was anger. I remember telling you that I shouldn't have to pay the price for something some other guy had done, and we ended up in a huge fight about it all.
Yeah, my fears actually came to fruition.
Absolutely.
It was hard.
Yeah, and back then, we didn't have very good communication skills to talk about tough topics.
No, we didn't.
So I got mad, you shut down, and then basically we really didn't talk about it much again for years.
Yeah.
Literally for
a long
years.
time.
So I might have slowed my drive-bys for a while at that time. But then they started back up, and I just kind of moved on, naively thinking that maybe you just got past it too.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I'm building more and more resentment because I told you about it, but you're continuing to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a personal story, and it's an example of actually two big challenges that we had in our marriage. First, how to communicate about this very sensitive and personal, sometimes awkward and embarrassing issue of sex.
Sure.
And again, like we shared last week, communication is key if we want to truly be known and experience that heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection in our sex life and in our marriage.
Yeah.
So I was struggling with how to approach the drive-by touching issue. And when I finally did bring it up with you, honey, like you said, things got pretty tense. And eventually we had to learn together how to talk about sensitive things without getting stuck in negative patterns of emotions or shutting down on each other.
Yeah, that's right. And the second challenge is really all about the wounds and the sexual baggage from the past. And the example that you just shared, honey, was just one story.
Right.
Like we could sit and share several other challenges that we've had to work through, both individually and as a couple, that are directly related to our past experiences.
Oh, could we? Yeah.
I don't think that we're the only couple that's been challenged by sexual baggage. Those hurts and those hangups from the past are real. And I think lots of couples experience it. And I know we've heard from some couples who've experienced it. When you struggle because you've been negatively treated by a partner from the past, that's going to come into marriage. And for every blended family couple, there's some sort of sexual history.
Yeah.
And if it's painful, it's probably going to rear its ugly head at some point. And so we've got to learn to be able to talk about it openly and share about it and honor each other through the process as we go.
And even normalize it and expect that that's going to be something you're going to need to deal with.
Yeah. And I mean, within the context of our marriage, we should be able to talk about these things openly and feel like we are going to be able to trust each other.
Right.
But, when it comes to these hard, crucial conversations, why is it that when it matters most, it's when we tend to do our worst? Just like when you tried to share this with me early on, I responded terribly.
Yeah.
And we've got to learn how to be able to respond to each other lovingly, not with accusation or with selfishness, which is really where I was in the moment.
Yeah. And there were so many times I wanted to talk to you about it, and I just couldn't. I didn't have the courage to because I didn't have the skills.
Right.
And so having the courage and then also really listening to understand. And we're going to talk more about that next week.
Yeah, for sure. So, why don't we just spend a little bit of time touching on some of the challenges that can be common, not just for step couples, but for lots of couples.
One challenge is how to build mutual understanding around your likes and your dislikes outside the bedroom. Because those things are going to also impact your sexual relationship.
For sure.
Honey, your innocent drive-by touching is an example for us, but there were other ways that we interacted in our daily life that would turn one or both of us off. And then our passion and desire would take a huge dip.
For sure.
Now, sometimes this would happen when we'd experience a disagreement or conflict or even minor irritations and habits that would cause one or both of us to withdraw, sometimes to punish the other or sometimes to protect ourselves.
For sure.
But if we can openly talk through these things rather than withdrawing from each other, we can build our understanding and awareness, and we can do something new to grow our connection.
Yeah, it's funny how we dig our heels in on things so much because of what we want. But if we really got to the core of it, what we actually want is a healthy sex life and a healthy connection in our marriage, right? So we've got to take some action around that, right? If my drive-by touching was a big turnoff for you because it triggered this painful memory, then really what we needed to figure out is how I was going to stop doing that. And that hopefully would lead us to be able to engage more, both inside and outside the bedroom.
Yeah, and it does. Once we finally were able to communicate effectively around this, you actually have stopped doing that.
I've been good.
You have been. For a while, yeah, you've been very intentional, and that's been, only in the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, so 75% of our marriage at this point was plagued by this.
Yeah. But like you mentioned a few minutes ago, you still have a need for physical touch.
I do. Can we hold hands right now?
No. Maybe later.
Okay. All right.
The reality is physical touch is one of your top love languages.
Yeah.
And so we needed to come up with some mutual understanding around when and how physical touch outside the bedroom would take place. Now, as it turns out, most of the time I really do enjoy being touched by you, honey, as long as I know it's coming.
Yeah.
And especially when you approach me with eye contact or some verbal affirmation first. So I don't feel like an object, right? So yes, Mike needed to understand my trigger and be willing to change his habit of drive-by touching, but that didn't mean that he had to stop touching me altogether.
Right. It was just one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to go to extremes either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've had to work together to build mutual understanding and some agreement around how we'll continue to connect physically outside the bedroom without getting hijacked by a painful memory that would lead to disconnection inside the bedroom.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to shut down your playfulness.
Right.
I just wanted to kind of talk about how we could do it differently.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And if I'm really honest, it wasn't easy for me. I actually had to shift my focus from what I thought I was going to be giving up to what we would be gaining. Honestly, I can be really selfish sometimes. I think you've probably learned that over the years. and I think that you've got a really nice butt. Oh. So I had to, examine, well, what is it that I really want for us to be connected both inside and outside the bedroom? And I had to shift my thoughts from me to we. So I wanted more to have a connection with you and to have some health in our sexual relationship than just being able to, grab your butt once in a while, even though it's a really nice butt.
Well, I'm glad you think my butt is nice.
It is.
So I should be really flattered by that, and I am. But at the same time, that doesn't change the reality of the trigger.
That's right. And, I encourage every couple to do this kind of work together. Be willing to openly communicate about the things that turn you off outside the bedroom and that you might be having a negative impact on your sexual relationship. And really focus on listening to each other and being willing to consider giving up small individual wants for the greater good of your mutual sexual connection. And also, talk about the things that turn you on.
Right.
Honey, you've expressed that when I help out around the house, specifically when I vacuum, that it turns you on and it actually draws you to me physically.
Right.
So I do a lot of vacuuming, right? And here's a little freebie tip for guys that are listening. One study led by John Gottman, a leading expert on marriage and relationships, found that men who do more housework have both happier marriages and better sex lives.
Ooh.
So bust out the vacuum, guys, and I'm sorry if your wife is nudging you right now.
Yeah, one of my top love languages actually is acts of service. And when you do something to help carry the load, or when you take care of something on my to-do list without being asked, it really shows how thoughtful and caring you are, and it makes me feel loved.
Yeah.
That's one thing that helps me draw closer to you physically.
That's why the vacuuming is sexy for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, most women have a need to feel emotionally secure and connected to their spouse. We want emotional closeness before we can engage sexually. Some women need to hear their husband affirm their love and commitment, either verbally or in a note or text message. Most women want to feel cherished, appreciated, and emotionally reassured of their husband's love.
Yeah.
And that our husband sees our innate beauty and value beyond the context of sex. We need that. So if you're listening and that resonates with you, then you might want to initiate a conversation to share that need with your husband.
Yeah.
What creates emotional connection for you with your husband? And just let him in on those things that make you feel loved outside the bedroom so that you're more receptive to sexual connection inside the bedroom.
Yeah, that's really right. And I'm going to just give a little tip, another little freebie tip for the ladies out there. Coming in saying, you never compliment me, or you don't
cherish me enough.
Yeah, taking that negative approach, that's probably not going to work. But if you're able to say something like, hey, I've been thinking and I want to share some things with you that I think is maybe going to increase some passion and romance and maybe even some more sex in our relationship. And I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about that. I bet he'll be willing to talk about that.
That'll perk his ears right up.
I'm just betting. Yeah. And then being able to share from a positive aspect of what your needs are without ever saying one word about what he's not doing.
Right, without being whiny or complaining.
Yeah. hey, I know that you love me, and it would really help me to feel closer to you if I heard it maybe a couple times a week at least.
And even be specific around how you would like to hear it. What has the most impact for you?
Is it a card? Is it verbally? Whatever it is. But taking that positive approach and just framing it around, hey, I just want to share this because I want a great sex life with you. I don't think there's a husband out there that says, I don't think I want a good sex life. It's just not going to happen that way. So just think about how you're going about. But, in the end, we need to remember that your spouse isn't a mind reader. None of us can simply expect that our spouse should know what we need outside the bedroom. We have to be able to communicate it. And ladies aren't the only ones who need some things outside the bedroom, right? Kim just shared that ladies often need to feel cherished. The research also reveals that men often feel connected to their wives through shared activity. It's not always just about sex for us. There's things that we need. Men enjoy experiencing adventure with their wives, doing things side by side, even small things. They often connect through activity. One recent memory for me was that was really kind of meaningful was we just hung out at Starbucks together.
Yeah.
We drank coffee. We relaxed. We each had our own book. And we just sat there side by side, reading our book, drinking our coffee, kind of giving a fun little smile or a glance once in a while. And honestly, I was surprised, actually. I'm like, I feel really connected to you.
Yeah, you've commented on that a lot.
We need to do that again, actually. I felt really connected to you, and I enjoyed that simple little time just side by side. So, we've also enjoyed things like working on projects together or doing things around the house like painting or setting, decorating, stuff like that, attending an event together, venturing out, and just having some fun.
Yeah.
So, guys, let your wives know how you want to connect with her outside the bedroom, and chances are she might be willing to engage it. And ladies, listen to it.
Yeah, ladies, be open.
Yeah.
Even if it's something you don't particularly enjoy, like a car show.
Yeah.
Go anyway.
Yeah, walk around with them. Right?
Find something there to enjoy.
Sure.
The last car show that I went to with you, honey, which I wasn't all that, excited about, but I know you love cars.
What? That's a surprise. I can't believe it.
But I enjoyed checking out the fuzzy dice on all the antique cars. I actually took 15 or 20 pictures of fuzzy dice.
Why does that not surprise me?
Yeah, so find something that you can engage in while you're engaging with your man.
Exactly. So here's the thing. Don't let your likes and dislikes, or rather your turn-ons and your turn-offs outside the bedroom become an obstacle to your passion inside the bedroom.
Right.
Be open and honest about those things and find ways to reach some mutual understanding and agreement that's going to help create mutual fulfillment. These things all matter.
Yeah.
You walking around to the car show with me matters to our sexual connection.
And you making me feel cherished and loved by vacuuming the rug, that really matters.
And we do need to understand that this isn't always easy.
Right.
Especially if you're dealing with some fear or you struggle with being vulnerable, because this kind of conversation is going to require some vulnerability and openly sharing with what's really going on for you. And that can just be hard.
Yeah, I've struggled with this over the years, but I really learned to grow in this area. I think you'd agree, honey.
Yeah.
And if you need a little encouragement, you can go and check out episode 98. It's called, Is Fear of Being Vulnerable Keeping You from Loving Your Spouse Wholeheartedly? Now, this is so important within the context of our sexual relationship.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is a must if you want to build mutual understanding and be fully known in your relationship, and if you want to enjoy a healthy, passionate sex life together, right?
For sure. The more vulnerable you are, the more connected your sex is probably going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we're resistant to sharing if we're holding on to some negative messages about sexuality in general.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, some of us were raised in homes where the topic of sex was off limits.
Oh, yeah, that was my home.
Yeah, and sexuality was seen as something dirty or even bad. And if we carry that kind of negative, shaming mindset with us into adulthood and into our marriage, it might be really hard to openly share or to be vulnerable about what we like and dislike and what we need in order to feel connected and experience real passion.
Yeah.
So, we both grew up in homes that conveyed a lot of shaming messages about sexuality.
Yep.
And they instilled fear and guilt to try and sort of extinguish our sexual urges or just kind of dismiss them.
Yeah.
Now, this kind of upbringing has definitely created some challenges for us, but we encourage you to push past any embarrassment or awkwardness or residual negativity and just allow yourself to open up to the beauty and the possibility of your sexual relationship with your spouse.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, sex is a good thing in your marriage, and it's okay to openly share and communicate about what you want your sex life to look like.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, well, let's talk about a few other things. Some couples face challenges when they're simply unaware of how different men and women are physiologically. We each have unique wiring and different sexual hormones, right? I know we've all had, biology in middle school and all, sex ed and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes we just need to be reminded that our body's sexual initiatives can often function very differently.
Yeah, we don't always think about that in the moment of frustration, right?
For sure,
But
yeah.
it's the truth.
We're not like, oh, yeah, you're hormonally different than I am, right? But when we're not aware or we're not paying attention to these differences, we sometimes land on some negative assumptions about our partner's desire and about their motives. We learned a lot from Shanti and Jeff Feldhun's books. They're called For Women Only and For Men Only. They're actually really great books. And they each have a single little chapter in there that are just packed with a whole lot of stats and some discussion around this whole idea of sexuality.
Yeah, really insightful.
It's great, yeah. Jeff and Shawnee interviewed hundreds of couples, and they engaged in some research-based understanding around the difference between men and women. And the books are quite fascinating and revealing. One insightful truth from the book For Men Only is that the average woman has less sexually assertive hormones than what the average man has. Now, I know that kind of seems like a no-brainer. But what that means is they have less of an urge to pursue sex. So the insight there from me is that it doesn't mean that you don't want sex or that you won't enjoy sex, but just that seeking it out isn't really what's on your mind.
Right.
Right? And I think this is a huge insight because most of us men, we assume or we want to assume that we have a similar sexual wiring as our wives, which for us is really just a wish most of the time.
Yeah, wishful
not a
thinking.
reality. Yeah, right?
Also in the book, one female survey participant said this: "One thing I most wish my husband knew was that just because I do not want sex as often as he does, I still love him deeply and find him very attractive." And, her response actually represents what 96% of the women confirmed, that their lack of desire for sex itself is not how they feel about their desire for their husband. 96%.
Yeah.
That's good news, guys.
Yeah.
Frequency of sex is one of the most common things couples disagree about. And when we don't understand our unique wiring, we can jump to some unfair conclusions. And we talked about that a little bit last week.
Yeah. Okay. I want to go back to something here. So when you turn me down, it's not really about me. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Sex just isn't on my radar a lot of the time, honestly.
Well, that's hard. It's hard to hear because sex is on my radar a lot. But if it's not about me, then I have to ask that question, well, what is it? That's kind of the big looming question I think a lot of us guys struggle with. And again, in that book, For Men Only, Jeff Feldhun offers guys 5 revelations that can radically improve sex in marriage. Now, we're not going to talk about all of them today, but let's just touch on one of the truths that he shares. He says, your wife has a lower sex drive than you. Okay, we know that. And she'd change that fact if she could. Wow. Now, honey, do you agree with that? Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
Really?
If I could turn up my libido to match yours, I would go for it.
Okay. Where's the dial? How do we do that?
I wish I knew. My lower sex drive has nothing to do with my enjoyment of sex with you.
Okay.
It's just that my mind and body simply aren't typically focused on sex. I'm often just fatigued or I'm distracted. And one of the challenges that pops up for lots of couples is not only frequency, but also who's going to initiate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know, honey, that you love it when I initiate sex, but that's just not where I'm focused. And I'm not the only woman that's true for.
Yeah.
In the book, Jeff goes on to explain the two different types of desire, which is really interesting for us when we read this.
Yeah.
Women are equipped with hormones that create a receptive sexual desire. This really means that women tend to be available or receptive, but simply don't have as much craving to pursue sex.
So the reality is men have more testosterone-based hormones that are linked to assertive sexual desire.
Right, they pursue it.
Right. So they're physiologically wired to crave and pursue that. But women have receptive sexual desire hormones. Seems like those kind of work together, actually.
Do they? Or against?
I mean it seems like they should kind of work together, but I got to be honest. Sometimes I get hung up on. I want you to initiate, and I get frustrated when you don't. But that's kind of a breakthrough thought for me to recognize that. Yeah.
So because women have lower levels of sexually assertive hormones, they're less likely to initiate sex, and the research has revealed that we're more susceptible to non-sexual distractions as well.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
So this means that things like, a noise from a kid's room or a headache or an unfinished to-do list or leftover stress, these are all easy distractions for women. And they can be a barrier to sexual activity.
Sure.
Especially exhaustion. One woman in the survey put it this way: for guys, it seems that sex provides relief or escape from exhaustion. For women, we have to pull ourselves out of exhaustion in order to want to have sex.
Okay, so maybe it doesn't work together all that well.
The bottom line to this truth was very clear in the survey. Among the happily married women, 100% said they would prefer to want sex as much as their husbands if they could.
Wow, that is really revealing, I think I've kind of learned something from that truth, and I can apply it to how we interact.
Really? Say more about that.
Well, when you seem distracted or you don't initiate sex or make it a priority, at least not as high of a priority as I make it, rather than just jumping to the assumption about your lack of desire or feeling frustrated or neglected, I could stop and take a minute to just remember that, wait a second, there is a physiological difference, right? And consider that you have that receptive hormone and I have more assertive hormones, and just try to speak that truth to myself, maybe relax a little bit. I think if I can remind myself of that and stay focused there, I might be a bit more patient and understanding, and that could change how I approach you and communicate about my desires. It could help me to change the story that's in my head that you should be initiating more, and instead find new ways to pursue you that kind of work for you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's great, because when I sense your frustration with me or your disappointment that I haven't initiated, then I feel pressure. And sometimes I feel like there's nothing I can do to meet your needs without compromising my own needs. And that feels really overwhelming and sometimes defeating.
I can see that.
But if you were to have deeper understanding and more patience, I would be more inclined to listen with a curiosity mindset to understand more about what you're experiencing, and I'd be more motivated to work together to meet your needs.
Okay.
And, honestly, you have gotten better around this over the years, especially since you've adopted that better mindset that we talked about last week. You're more focused on mutual fulfillment instead of your own individual gratification. So you have gotten better.
Yeah, that's something I want to continue working on. And guys, if you want to learn the other 4 truths from Jeff, I really do encourage you to go get that book For Men Only and check it out. The research that Jeff and Shanti have done is super valuable.
Yeah.
So we'll put some links in the show notes to those books.
Yeah, they're both good.
So we've explored some common challenges that most couples experience. We talked about sexual baggage from our past that we need to share with our spouse to get vulnerable so that we can be fully known and work together to overcome some triggers in those challenging situations.
Right. Yeah. We also talked about how specific things outside the bedroom, our turnoffs, can negatively impact our passion and lead us to withdraw from each other sexually, and how important it is to build mutual understanding and some agreements so that our passion inside the bedroom doesn't get hijacked, right? That's the goal.
That's right. And we explored the challenges that we could face if we aren't aware of our physiological differences, things like assertive and responsive hormones. So let's talk a little bit about how these challenges might bring up specific issues and some pain for blended couples.
Right. So earlier, as I was sharing about sexual baggage from my past, as a listener, you might have thought about your own sexual baggage, what you or maybe what your spouse brought into your marriage. And because a blended family is formed out of loss, right, due to divorce, death, or some kind of separation, that also includes residue from a previous sexual relationship.
Yeah.
And because that was likely a previous marriage that resulted in children, which is the case for most of us, this previous relationship certainly was a deep sexual experience.
Yeah.
Most likely, some of that was positive, but chances are some of it was also negative or painful.
Yeah.
And like I shared earlier, I really wanted to leave my past in the past and move on. But unfortunately, sexual baggage seems to get unpacked and strewn about in our current relationship, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. And, even if you weren't previously married, you might have brought some sexual baggage in anyway, which was true for me.
Right.
So first, we need to recognize and take ownership for that sexual baggage. See, when we try to hide it or, kind of repress it, things just get more and more difficult, and we're going to eventually create disconnection in our marriage.
Right.
So you've got to get honest with yourself and with your spouse and whatever it is you're experiencing and how that past might be impacting your marriage right now. If, as an example, in your previous marriage, you and your wife lived like roommates and you felt sexually neglected, you might have a really strong, painful reaction when your current wife turns you down sexually, even if the two of you have been enjoying some regular frequency in your marriage. That deep-rooted, fear-based thing is really a painful memory, and it can rear its ugly head at any time. And in that moment, cause you to overreact or even lash out, leaving your wife feeling confused, unheard, disconnected, or even disrespected. So as we've stressed, communication is really, really necessary, and getting healing for some of that baggage is really necessary as well. You might need some external help to do that.
And it can be really hard to communicate about this stuff, especially if you've experienced things like sexual abuse, or if you were exploited, if sex was used to manipulate, or if you were sexually oppressed in some way.
Yeah.
Right? These are not fun things to talk about, but if you're being triggered or reliving these experiences like I was with Mike's drive-by touching, it isn't healthy to keep it bottled up, and it will continue to negatively affect your marriage.
Yeah.
This is something I can say with confidence because we've lived it. And if that's you, I encourage you to get help. Maybe you aren't quite yet ready to talk to your spouse about these things, and that's okay. But find a qualified therapist or a trusted friend to talk to, even if it's really hard. That's a great first step with the goal to eventually be able to be vulnerable with your spouse and really share what's going on. It's so important.
I totally agree. And, maybe your baggage isn't really rooted in a past relationship, but it's from your childhood. inappropriate things were done to you, or exposure, to sexually charged materials that still haunt you today. They can bring up some really painful memories. This is real stuff. Don't ignore the baggage. Get that help that you need to get healing and move past these wounds, or at least through the wounds, so that you can freely engage in sex and enjoy a healthy, fulfilling marriage in this area. In the book, The Smart Stepfamily Marriage, Ron Deal and David Olson offer 6 tips for not getting caught in the past. One of those tips is to confront your sexual ghosts.
Yeah, that's so critical. Yeah. A few other tips they offer is to calm your insecurities. Remember that you're with a new partner. This isn't a repeat of your experience with your former spouse.
Yeah.
If you were sexually rejected or hurt in the past, be careful not to let your insecurities, your triggers, or anxieties take over in your current relationship.
Yeah, that's such a great tip. I think in this one area we've been talking about the drive-by touching, and I'm the one who's made some pretty big adjustments to help you not have to experience that. But if we had more time, we could tell several stories of those things that you have moved past and recognized, wait, Mike is different than a previous relationship. And you've been the one to make some changes and really move toward me.
Yeah.
And so it's been really mutual in this type of work. But that's great. We're building something new together now here, not trying to avoid or even relive some sort of a past thing. Yeah.
Yeah. If you've got insecurities, don't ignore them.
That's right.
Deal with them and learn how you can calm them. Another tip was don't ignore sexual problems and don't overreact.
Right.
They say it's normal for couples to encounter difficulty in this area, but don't panic. Talk it through, and if necessary, find a sex therapist or a specialized counselor who can help and who also understands the complexities of blended families. So
That's
important.
Right. That's right. And something every one of us can do right away is to just simply assess where we are. So next week, we're going to talk about some tips for how to overcome some of these challenges and some others as well. But this week, between now and then, it might be really helpful for you to simply ask yourself a few questions. You might just say, hey, what are the challenges that we're facing right now in this season? Are some similar to the ones that Kim and I have shared today, or do you have something different going on? Just naming it can really help you.
Yeah.
Or you might ask yourself, well, how can I reframe the challenge that we're experiencing through that healthy mindset that we talked about last week?
Right.
So if I really adopt this mindset of, hey, my sexual relationship with my spouse is not about individual gratification, but it's all about mutual fulfillment for each other, how can I reframe my challenge through that lens?
Yeah.
That actually might lead us to a really great conversation or even a solution without professional intervention.
Right.
You never know if we just reframe it, right?
You've done that, and it's really been helpful.
Yeah. Or maybe you could ask yourself, how might I create healthy dialogue around these challenges, right? So just a couple little tips on this. I encourage you to tackle only one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Don't overwhelm your partner.
Yeah.
If you have 10 things, figure out the one that's most important to you and just focus on that one, and don't worry about the other 9 yet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, especially as you're learning how to communicate about these really sensitive issues.
Yeah. And as you're creating that healthy dialogue, reassure your spouse about your love. It's all about meeting the need for mutual fulfillment, right? Not individual physical gratification. So we're trying to do this dance, but I've got to continually reassure you, hey, I know this is hard, but I love you and I want to work through this. I want us to have a good, healthy marriage. Yeah. And then finally, Kim, you just said this a moment ago, listen with a curiosity mindset. You got to try not to get defensive or offended, and that can be really challenging.
Yeah, because that can shut the conversation and the communication down right away. And then, like what happened to us, we didn't talk about these things for a long time.
Absolutely.
And it didn't serve us well.
That's right. And, some couples really need to go find that sex therapist like you were talking about, get some really specialized help. Other couples really just need some communication tools.
Right.
And if that's what you're looking for, if you're just saying, boy, we're just having trouble kind of controlling our emotions when these particular topics come up,
right,
that's something we can really help with. And so if that's something you want to learn about, don't hesitate. Go over to the show notes and click on the link to schedule a free coaching call with us. And we would be happy to see if we could help you with
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. All right. So talked about a lot of challenges, and we left you with some questions to ask yourself. Just ponder those things over the next week or so. And then next week, we're going to be back. One more installment of this whole series around passion and sex. And we're going to talk about some tips that can really help you move forward. But that's going to make today's episode a wrap.
Until next time.